Good evening, and welcome. Tonight we're going to travel back in time, more than 4,000 years, to a civilization that still refuses to give up its secrets. Ancient Egypt. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to remember anything. There will be no quiz at the end, no important details you might miss. Just let these stories wash over you, like the waters of the Nile, rising and falling, year after year, century after century. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin our journey into the unsolved mysteries of ancient Egypt. Let's start with the most famous structure on Earth, the Great Pyramid of Giza. For 3,800 years, it was the tallest building humans had ever made. Nothing came close. Not the cathedrals of Europe, not the temples of Asia. Nothing until the year 1311, when a church spire in England finally passed it. Think about that for a moment. A building made of stone, without machines, without iron tools, without the wheel being used in any meaningful way on the construction site, held the world record for nearly 4,000 years. The pyramid contains roughly 2.3 million blocks of stone. Some weigh 2.5 tons, about the weight of a modern car. Others, the granite blocks above the king's chamber, weigh up to 80 tons. 80 tons. Those granite blocks came from Aswan, a quarry more than 800 kilometers away. And here is where the mystery begins. We know roughly when it was built, around 2560 BC, during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu. We know who ordered it. We even found the workers' villages nearby, with their bakeries, their breweries, their medical facilities. These were not slaves, by the way. That's an old myth. The evidence shows paid laborers, organized in teams, with names like Friends of Khufu competing against each other, like construction crews with team spirit. But what we still don't fully understand is how. How did they lift 80-ton granite blocks, dozens of meters into the air, and place them with millimeter precision? How did they align the entire pyramid to true north with an accuracy of less than 1/10 of 1 degree? Modern buildings rarely achieve that, even with GPS. There are theories, of course. Ramps. Straight ramps, spiral ramps, internal ramps hidden inside the structure itself. Levers, sledges pulled over wet sand, which experiments show reduces friction dramatically. Each theory explains some of it. None of them explains all of it. In 2017, scientists used cosmic ray imaging, particles from space that pass through solid stone, to scan the pyramid from the inside. And they found something nobody expected. A void, a hidden space 30 meters long, sitting directly above the Grand Gallery, sealed for 4,500 years. No entrance, no exit. We still don't know what it is. It might be a construction feature, a way to relieve weight. It might be a hidden chamber. It might be something we haven't even thought of yet. It's still there, tonight, unopened, as you're falling asleep. Some secrets. Keep well. Around the year 1340 BC, there lived a queen whose name meant, "The beautiful one has come." Nefertiti. You've seen her face, the famous bust with the tall blue crown, the elegant neck, the calm, knowing expression. It sits in a museum in Berlin, and it is perhaps the most recognizable face of the ancient world. But here is what's strange. We have her face, but we have never found her body. Nefertiti was not just any queen. For a time, she may have ruled Egypt as pharaoh herself, after the death of her husband, the rebel king Akhenaten. Some scholars believe she changed her name and ruled under a different identity. A woman of that importance would have received a magnificent burial. So where is she? In 2015, an archaeologist studying high-resolution scans of Tutankhamun's tomb noticed something. Faint lines in the plaster of the north wall, lines that looked like a sealed doorway. The theory was breathtaking. Tutankhamun died young, unexpectedly, at around 19. His tomb is unusually small for a pharaoh, almost as if it was never meant for him. Almost as if his burial was rushed into the outer chamber of someone else's tomb. Someone important. Someone buried just behind that north wall. Perhaps Nefertiti herself. Radar scans were performed. The first ones seemed to show a hidden space. The world held its breath. Then more scans were done, and the results came back ambiguous. Some teams found signs of a cavity. Others found nothing at all. To this day, the wall has not been opened. Cutting into it would risk destroying the painted plaster, some of the most precious artwork that survives from the ancient world. So the question simply waits. Behind a painted wall, in a valley of silent tombs, the most beautiful queen of Egypt may be resting just a few centimeters beyond our reach, or there may be nothing there at all. Both possibilities are somehow equally haunting. In the Temple of Hathor, at a place called Dendera, there is a carving that has puzzled people for over a century. It shows what appears to be a giant glass bulb. Inside the bulb, a snake, rising in a wavy line, like a filament. The bulb rests on a pillar that looks remarkably like an insulator. A cable-like object runs to a box. Some people look at this carving and see an electric lamp. And so the legend of ancient Egyptian electricity was born. Books were written. Documentaries were filmed. The idea is irresistible, a forgotten technology, lost to time. The truth, as so often, is quieter, but in its own way, just as interesting. Egyptologists can actually read the inscriptions around the carving, and the texts explain exactly what the image shows. It is a creation myth, the lotus flower, opening at the dawn of the world, with a snake god emerging from it, inside a protective bubble of divine energy. The cable is a ceremonial bark. The insulator is a djed pillar, a symbol of stability. So, mystery solved? Not quite, because there remains one genuinely unanswered question about ancient Egyptian engineering. And it's a question the light bulb legend was invented to solve. The deep tombs and temple chambers are covered in detailed, colorful paintings. Painting them took weeks, months, in total darkness. So how did they light their work? Torches produce soot, and there is remarkably little soot damage on the ceilings. Oil lamps also smoke, mirrors reflecting sunlight. Work in theory and experiments show light can be bounced 2 or 3 times around corners, but deep tombs twist and turn too much. The honest answer is, we're not entirely sure. Probably very clean-burning oil lamps, with salt added to reduce smoke, and a lot of patience. But sometimes, late at night, it's more fun to imagine a soft, humming glow in a chamber under the desert, 4,000 years ago. An obelisk is a single piece of stone. That's the part people forget. It is not built, not assembled, not stacked. It is carved from one solid block of granite and then raised upright, like a needle pointing at the sun. The largest obelisk ever successfully raised weighs about 450 tons. 450 tons of solid granite. In the quarries of Aswan, there is an unfinished obelisk, still lying in the bedrock, abandoned when cracks appeared. If it had been completed, it would have weighed nearly 1,200 tons. 1,200 tons. There is no crane in the world today, no standard construction crane, that could simply lift that. And yet the Egyptians were clearly confident they could move it, or they would never have started carving. We know fragments of the process. The granite was pounded, not chiseled, pounded hour after hour with balls of dolerite, a stone harder than granite itself. Workers crouched in narrow trenches, hammering in the Egyptian heat for months. To transport the finished obelisks, they were loaded onto enormous barges and floated down the Nile during the flood season when the water came to them. But the raising, the actual moment of tipping a 450-ton needle into a perfectly vertical position, onto a base it must sit on, exactly centered. That we have never fully reconstructed. The leading theory involves a funnel of sand, slowly drained from beneath the stone, lowering it gently into place, while ropes and manpower controlled the angle. In the 1990s, a television crew tried to raise a mere 40-ton obelisk this way. The first attempt failed. The second took weeks and succeeded only with modern equipment assisting. The Egyptians raised dozens of them. Some now stand in Rome, in Paris, in London, in New York. Taken, borrowed, gifted over the centuries. The needles of the sun god, scattered across a world their makers never knew existed. In 1881, in a hidden cache of royal mummies, archaeologists found something disturbing. Most mummies rest in peace. Their faces are calm, their arms folded, their expression almost gentle. This one was different. His mouth was wide open, frozen in what looked like an eternal scream. His hands and feet showed signs of having been bound. He was wrapped, not in fine royal linen, but in a sheepskin, which to Egyptians was ritually unclean. And strangest of all, he had been mummified, but carelessly. No name was written anywhere on his wrappings. For an ancient Egyptian, this was the deepest possible punishment, because to them, a name was not just a word. A name was a vessel of the soul. To erase someone's name was to erase them from eternity, to deny them the afterlife itself. So who was he? The leading theory connects him to one of the darkest episodes in Egyptian history, the Harem Conspiracy. Around 1155 B.C., court documents, actual trial records, survive from that time. They describe a plot led by a secondary queen named Ti to assassinate the pharaoh Ramesses III and place her son, Prince Pentawere, on the throne. The plot was discovered, the conspirators were tried, and the records state that Prince Pentawere was permitted to take his own life. DNA testing in 2012 showed that the screaming mummy was very likely a son of Ramesses III, a prince who reached for a throne and lost everything, including his name. For 3,000 years he lay in the dark, screaming silently into his bandages. Though, here is a gentler footnote to end on. Experts say the open mouth may simply be what happens when a body is not carefully positioned and the jaw relaxes. Perhaps he isn't screaming at all. Perhaps, after all these centuries, he's only sleeping with his mouth open, like some of us will be very soon. Of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, 6 are gone, and 1 remains. The Great Pyramid, you've already heard about tonight. But Egypt built another wonder, one that disappeared, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Imagine a tower, taller than a 40-story building, rising from a small island at the edge of the sea, built of pale stone in 3 tiers, square at the bottom, octagonal in the middle, round at the top, and at its peak, a fire, burning day and night. Its light thrown far across the Mediterranean by a great polished mirror of bronze, or perhaps glass. Sailors said you could see it from 50 kilometers away. For 1,600 years it stood there, longer than most empires, longer than most religions have existed. Then the earth began to shake, earthquake after earthquake, in 956, in 1303, in 1323, cracked it, tilted it, and finally brought it down, stone by stone, into the harbor. In 1480, a fortress was built from its bones. You can visit that fortress today and touch blocks of red granite that once stood 300 feet above the sea. But here is the part I find most peaceful. In 1994, divers exploring the harbor floor of Alexandria found them. Hundreds of enormous stone blocks, columns, statues of pharaohs, sphinxes, lying quietly on the seabed, exactly where they fell, 700 years ago. The lighthouse never left. It's still there, in the warm green water, covered in soft sediment, visited by fish, resting. A wonder of the world that simply lay down. Around 1350 B.C., a young pharaoh came to the throne under the name Amenhotep IV. Within a few years, he did something no ruler had ever dared. He canceled the gods, all of them. Osiris, Isis, Horus, Anubis, the entire crowded heaven of Egypt. Gods the people had worshipped for 2,000 years. In their place, he declared, there was only one God, the Aten, the disk of the sun itself. Not a man with a falcon's head, not a story. Just light. He changed his name to Akhenaten, the one who serves the Aten. He built a brand new capital city in the empty desert, Akhenaten, and moved tens of thousands of people there. He closed the old temples. His agents traveled the country, chiseling the names of the old gods off the walls. Remember what names meant to Egyptians. This wasn't vandalism. This was deicide, killing gods by erasing them. For 17 years, Egypt followed one man's vision of a single god of light. And then he died, and Egypt took its revenge. His city was abandoned within a few years. His temples were torn down, the blocks reused as filler inside other buildings. His name was chiseled away wherever it appeared. His face was smashed from statues. The kings who came after left him off the official lists. As far as Egypt was concerned, he had never existed. His son had to change his own name from Tutankhaten to Tutankhamun to escape the shadow. And here is the mystery that remains. Why did he do it? Was it true belief? A genuine spiritual revelation? Was it politics? A move to break the power of the wealthy priesthood? Was it, as some speculate, something stranger? We will probably never know what moved him. The man who tried to erase the gods was erased by them instead. And yet, 33 centuries later, we say his name again, every single day, in books, in documentaries, in quiet videos late at night. Akhenaten, erasure, it turns out, doesn't always last. Here is a strange piece of arithmetic. Egypt was ruled by pharaohs for roughly 3,000 years. We know the names of about 170 of them. King lists, carved in stone, survive. Now count the royal mummies we have actually found and identified with confidence. Fewer than 30. Where is everyone else? Where is Nefertiti, as we discussed? Where is Akhenaten, Tutankhamun's young widow, who vanishes from history after his death? Where is Imhotep, the genius architect of the first pyramid, who was so revered he was later worshipped as a god? People searched for his tomb for centuries. It has never been found. Where is Alexander the Great? Yes, even him. He died in Babylon, but his body was brought to Egypt and displayed in a magnificent tomb in Alexandria for over 600 years. Roman emperors visited it. Julius Caesar stood before it. Augustus, reportedly, touched the face and accidentally broke off a piece of the nose. And then, around the year 400, the records simply stop mentioning it. A tomb visited by emperors, one of the most famous places in the ancient world. Faded out of history like a photograph left in the sun. Somewhere under the streets of modern Alexandria, under apartment buildings and shops and traffic, the conqueror of the known world may still be lying. Undisturbed, more than 140 royal tombs and countless noble ones are estimated to still be hidden under the sands of Egypt. Archaeologists say, with quiet confidence, that the golden age of discovery is not behind us. It hasn't even properly begun. Every year, the sand gives back a little more. There is something deeply calming about that, I think. The earth keeps its treasures patiently and reveals them only when it's ready. The ancient Egyptians had a calendar of 365 days, 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra days at the end of the year, which were considered the birthdays of the gods. 365 days. They worked that out more than 4,000 years ago, without telescopes, without clocks, without mathematics as we know it. How? They watched one star, Sirius, the brightest star in the sky. The Egyptians called her Sopdet. For 70 days each year, Sirius disappears, lost in the glare of the sun. And then, one morning, just before dawn, she rises again, blazing on the eastern horizon for the first time. The Egyptians noticed something miraculous about that morning. It always came just before the Nile began to flood. The flood was everything. It brought the black, fertile mud that fed the entire civilization. Predicting it was predicting life itself. So the priests watched for Sirius, year after year, generation after generation, marking the days between each return. 365. They even noticed, over centuries, that the calendar slowly drifted. By about one day every 4 years, they knew about what we would call the leap year problem. 1,000 years before Julius Caesar invented the solution, using, by the way, Egyptian astronomers as his advisors. Our calendar today, the one on your phone, is the great-great-grandchild of priests on mud-brick rooftops watching for a single star in the hour before sunrise. When Sirius rises tonight, somewhere over the desert, she is still on time. She is always on time. There was a village in a desert valley whose entire purpose was secrets. Its name was Deir el-Medina, but the Egyptians called it the place of truth. The men who lived there were the artists and craftsmen who carved and painted the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. The most secret construction sites in the world. These workers knew where the pharaohs slept. They knew the locations, the layouts, the treasures. So they were settled in an isolated village, walled, watched, supplied with water and food by donkey, so they would never need to leave. And because these workers were unusually literate, they left us something priceless, thousands of scribbled notes on flakes of limestone and broken pottery, and through them, ancient Egypt suddenly speaks. We have their attendance records, including the excuses. One man missed work because he was brewing beer. Another because of a scorpion sting. One because he had a hangover. It's written right there. Drinking with Khonsu. We have the world's first recorded labor strike, around 1157 BC, when grain payments came late. The workers laid down their tools, marched to the temple, and staged a sit-in, chanting, "We are hungry." They received their grain. We have their love poems, their laundry lists, their jokes, and their court cases, including one epic feud over a stolen donkey that dragged on for years. And we have this, my favorite detail. On the walls of the grand royal tombs, hidden in corners, archaeologists sometimes find tiny doodles, a sketch of a foreman drawn with a big nose, a cartoon animal, little jokes left by bored artists 3,000 years ago. The pharaohs built monuments to be remembered forever, but somehow it's the workers, with their hangovers and their donkey disputes, who feel immortal. People have always been people, even in the place of truth. The great Sphinx of Giza is older than most countries, older than the alphabet you read, older, possibly, than we even believe. A lion's body, a king's face, carved from a single ridge of living rock, 240 feet long, gazing east toward the rising sun for at least 4,500 years. And we know astonishingly little about it. We don't know for certain who built it. The traditional answer is the pharaoh Khafre, whose pyramid stands behind it. But no inscription anywhere from that era says so. The Sphinx itself bears no original text at all. We don't know what they called it. The name Sphinx is Greek, given 1,000 years later. And then there are the rumors of what lies beneath. This is where legend and science braid together. The legends speak of a hall of records, a hidden library beneath the Sphinx's paws, containing the lost knowledge of a forgotten age. That part is myth, born in the imagination of mystics. But here is the strange thing. When scientists actually scanned beneath the Sphinx with seismographs and ground-penetrating radar, they did find anomalies, cavities, hollow spaces in the rock below. And there is a real door. In 1980s restoration photos, you can see it. A passage entering the Sphinx's rump, explored briefly, leading down into the bedrock and ending unfinished. There are at least 3 known shafts and tunnels in and under the Sphinx. Most appear to be ancient treasure hunters' attempts or natural fissures. But the deepest cavities have never been fully explored. Excavation beneath the Sphinx is mostly forbidden. The risk to the monument is too great, so it simply sits there. Every night, when the tourists leave and the desert grows quiet and cold, the Sphinx watches the eastern horizon, waiting for a sunrise it has seen, more than 1.5 million times. Whatever it knows, it keeps. The Egyptians did not fear sleep. To them, sleep was a rehearsal, a nightly journey into the same mysterious country. The soul would one day cross for real. And for that final journey, they wrote a guidebook. We call it the Book of the Dead. They called it something far more beautiful. The Book of Coming Forth by Day. It wasn't a single book, but a collection of nearly 200 spells, prayers, and maps, personalized for each traveler, painted on papyrus scrolls, and tucked into the wrappings of the mummy, like a passport and a travel guide, in one. The text described the journey in detail, the gates one must pass, the names of the gatekeepers, which must be spoken aloud, the rivers, the fields, the boatman who ferries souls, who will only row you if you can name every part of his boat, and at the journey's end, the famous scene, painted 1,000 times. The Hall of Judgment. There, the heart of the traveler is placed on a great golden scale and weighed against a single feather, the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. A heart heavy with cruelty sinks, but a heart that is light, a heart in balance, light as truth itself, passes, and the soul walks on into the field of reeds, which was not a strange or alien heaven, but simply Egypt, a perfect Egypt, the same river, the same palm trees, the same family, waiting, the same golden light of late afternoon. Forever. The Egyptians spent so much effort on death, not because they loved death, but because they could not bear for life to end. Let us stay a little longer in the land of the pharaohs. There are more stories waiting in the sand. Have you ever wondered how mummification actually worked? Not the horror movie version, but the real craft, performed by quiet professionals for 3,000 years. When someone died in ancient Egypt, their family brought them to a special workshop on the west bank of the Nile, the side of the setting sun. The embalmers there were part priest, part surgeon, part artist. The process took 70 days, the same number of days that Sirius spends hidden from the sky. The Egyptians loved that kind of symmetry. First, the body was washed in water from the Nile and palm wine. The internal organs were carefully removed and preserved in 4 special jars, each protected by its own minor god. The lungs, the liver, the stomach, the intestines, each had a guardian, but the heart stayed, because the Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was where the soul lived, where thinking happened, where memory rested. The heart would be needed for that final weighing against the feather. The brain they considered mostly unimportant, a kind of packing material inside the skull. They were brilliant and sometimes wonderfully wrong. Then came the salt, a natural salt called natron, gathered from dry lake beds. The body was covered in it completely and left for 40 days, while the desert salt slowly, gently drew out every drop of moisture. What remained was light, dry, and permanent. Then the wrapping began. Hundreds of meters of linen, wound in careful layers, with amulets tucked between them, each one placed with a whispered spell. A scarab over the heart, an eye of Horus for protection. The finest mummies had their faces painted, their nails covered in gold, and a mask placed over the head. So the soul, returning from its journeys, would always recognize its own face. 70 days after death, the family returned, and what they received was not a corpse. It was a vessel prepared for eternity. Some of those vessels are still intact today, 30 centuries later. The embalmers promised their customers forever. And in a way, no other craftsmen in history have kept their promise so well. Now, let me tell you about a king who was actually a queen. Her name was Hatshepsut, and around 1479 B.C., she did something extraordinary. She was the daughter of one pharaoh, the wife of another. When her husband died, the heir, a stepson, was only a small child. So Hatshepsut did what royal widows sometimes did. She ruled as regent in the boy's name. But then, after a few years, something changed. She stopped ruling for the boy and started ruling as pharaoh herself, not as a queen, as a king. She took the full royal titles. She wore the royal headdress, and in official statues, she even wore the ceremonial false beard of the pharaohs, the same braided beard the male kings wore. The strange thing is, it worked for 22 years. Egypt thrived under her. Almost no wars, massive building projects, and the most famous expedition in Egyptian history. A great trading voyage to a mysterious southern land called Punt, which brought back gold, ebony, exotic animals, and living mer-trees, their roots carefully packed in baskets. Her memorial temple still stands today, rising in 3 grand terraces against a wall of desert cliffs. Many consider it the most beautiful building in Egypt. And then she died, and the boy, now a grown man, finally became pharaoh. For 20 years, nothing unusual happened, and then, quietly, systematically, someone began erasing her. Her statues were pulled down and smashed. Her name was chiseled out of inscriptions and replaced with the names of male kings. Her image vanished from temple walls. Whoever did it was careful, thorough, and patient. For 3,000 years, history forgot that one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs was a woman. Only in the modern era did scholars piece her back together, reading the ghost outlines left where her figures had been scraped away. Why was she erased? Revenge? Politics? An attempt to keep women from ever ruling again? We don't know. But here is the quiet justice of it. The erasers worked so hard to make the world forget her name. And tonight, thousands of years later, it's their names that nobody remembers. Hatshepsut sleeps, famous. Of all the rulers of Egypt, none is more famous than the very last one, Cleopatra. And yet, of all of them, she is the one whose tomb we have never found. Cleopatra VII was Greek by blood, the last of a dynasty descended from one of Alexander's generals. But she was Egyptian by heart, the first ruler of her entire dynasty, in 300 years, who even bothered to learn the Egyptian language. She spoke 9 languages, ran the economy of the wealthiest country in the Mediterranean, and held back the most powerful empire on earth for 20 years with nothing but wit, charm, and nerve. You know how the story ends. Rome came, as Rome always did. Her fleet was defeated. Her lover Mark Antony died in her arms, and rather than be paraded through Rome in chains, she chose her own ending, in August of the year 30 B.C. The Roman historians say she was buried with full honors, together with Antony, in a magnificent tomb that she had built for herself, somewhere near her palace, by the sea. And then the trail goes cold. Here is the problem. The Alexandria of Cleopatra no longer exists. Centuries of earthquakes and slowly rise in water tipped the entire royal quarter, palace, temples, streets, and all, into the harbor. Her city is underwater. Divers today swim over fallen columns and sphinxes and pavement stones that her sandals may have touched. If her tomb was in the palace quarter, it dissolved into the sea long ago. But there is another theory. Some archaeologists believe she was buried outside the city, at a temple of Osiris and Isis, a place called Taposiris Magna, about 45 kilometers west of Alexandria. For the last 20 years, a team has been excavating there, and they keep finding tantalizing things. Tunnels, deep underground, coins bearing Cleopatra's face, statues, burial shafts, a vast network of tombs, as if important people very much wanted to be buried near someone. In 2022, they discovered a great stone tunnel, 1,300 meters long, carved deep beneath the temple, heading toward the sea. Where does it lead? The excavation is still going on right now as you drift off to sleep. Somewhere under the water or under the sand, the last pharaoh of Egypt is still keeping her final secret. Here is something gentle and a little strange to think about. The Egyptians loved cats, not the way we love cats, posting pictures of them, complaining as they knock things off tables. They loved them religiously. To the Egyptians, the cat was the living image of the goddess Bastet, protector of the home, of women, of children, and of sleep itself. A cat in the house was a small piece of heaven in residence. When a family cat died, the entire household went into mourning. The Greek historian Herodotus reports that Egyptians would shave off their own eyebrows as a sign of grief and mourn until the eyebrows grew back. Killing a cat, even by accident, could mean death. There is an ancient account of a Roman soldier who accidentally killed a cat in Alexandria and was torn apart by a mob, despite the king himself trying to intervene. Egypt was, at that moment, desperately trying to stay friends with Rome. It didn't matter. You did not harm cats in Egypt. When cats died, they were mummified just like people, wrapped in patterned linen with little painted faces, pointed ears shaped in the wrappings, whiskers carefully drawn on. Archaeologists have found them, not by the dozen, not by the thousand, by the hundreds of thousands. In 1888, a farmer near a place called Beni Hassan broke through the roof of an underground chamber and found a sea of cat mummies, an estimated 200,000 of them, or more. And here the story takes a turn that I find oddly soothing in its absurdity. Victorian England heard about the discovery, and a businessman had an idea. The mummies were bought by the ton, shipped to Liverpool, ground up, and sold to English farmers as fertilizer. 19 tons of sacred cats spread over the turnip fields of England. The auctioneer in Liverpool reportedly used a mummified cat as his gavel. Somewhere in the English countryside tonight, the fields are still, very slightly, Egyptian. Bastet, one hopes, has a sense of humor, and so we come to the most famous curse in the world. In November 1922, an archaeologist named Howard Carter, after years of fruitless searching, found a stairway cut into the floor of the Valley of the Kings. It led down to a sealed door stamped with the name Tutankhamun. Behind it lay the only nearly intact royal tomb ever found in Egypt. 5,000 objects, chariots, thrones, beds of gilded wood, and that golden mask, which may be the most beautiful object human hands have ever made. The world went completely. Egypt mad. And then people started dying. The expedition's wealthy sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, died just 5 months after the tomb was opened from an infected mosquito bite. The newspapers reported that at the moment of his death, the lights of Cairo flickered and went out. A visiting railroad tycoon died after seeing the tomb. Carter's personal secretary died young. Each death made the headlines. The curse of the pharaoh strikes again. It was said, though never actually found, that an inscription at the tomb warned, "Death comes on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." So, was there a curse? Here is what the numbers say. Of the 58 people who were present when the tomb and sarcophagus were opened, only 8 died within a dozen years. The rest lived long, ordinary lives. Howard Carter himself, the man who broke the seal, who spent 10 years working inside the tomb, handling every sacred object, the man the curse should have wanted most, lived for another 17 years and died peacefully at 64 of natural causes. The curse, statistically speaking, was just newspapers doing what newspapers do. But late at night, it's worth remembering the other side of the story. A king who died at 19, nearly erased from history by his successors, his small tomb forgotten, overlooked by every tomb robber for 3,000 years, became, because of that forgetting, the most famous pharaoh who ever lived. His name, Tutankhamun, is now spoken millions of times a day in every language on earth. The Egyptians believed that to speak the name of the dead is to make them live again. By their own measure, no human being in history is more alive than the boy king. All those pyramids, all that gold, all those spells were simply a civilization saying, "Let this never stop." And so, our journey ends, where all journeys end, back in the quiet of the present. The pyramids still stand tonight, under the same stars the builders knew. Sirius still rises, on time. The Sphinx still watches the horizon, and the hidden void in the Great Pyramid is still sealed, still silent, still waiting. Some mysteries will be solved in your lifetime. New tombs will open. New names will be spoken again after thousands of years of silence, and some mysteries will simply remain as they are. And maybe that's all right. The sands of Egypt have taught us that nothing is ever really lost. It only rests a while. Sleep well.